had the DA going to trials, bringing a letter from the Catholic Archbishop telling all the Catholic jurors in New Orleans that it was okay to vote for the death penalty as good Catholics. That's what we were up against. And it was very heartfelt with the Pope. When you have a chance to talk to the Pope, when you're a Catholic, you talk the truth. And you don't pussyfoot around and just say nice things to your holiness, this or that. And what I was able to do with Pope John Paul, who was very pastoral, was lay 14 years of experience in his lap. And I said, Your Holiness, at the Catholic Catechism it says we respect the dignity of innocent life. Well, what about the guilty? And when you're walking with a human being who's shackled hand and foot and is saying to you, Sister, pray that God holds up my legs, because he doesn't want his legs to buckle and he doesn't want to faint and he's trying to hold on to his dignity. I said, there is no dignity in this death. And I said, you left a big loophole in the last encyclical you wrote. You did good in it because you talked about human rights, which was wonderful, and the inviolable dignity of the human person, great. But then you left this big loophole and said, but in cases of absolute necessity, the state can execute. I said, your words are going to be quoted by anybody who wants the death penalty, because they always are going to claim it's an absolute necessity. Providence moves for us, resources make their way to us. Here, the Catholic DA of New Orleans, Harry Connie Sr., his son plays a nice music. This is the daddy, Catholic daddy, goes to Mass every Sunday and is all for executing people Monday through Saturday. He said, he quoted the Pope's words, sure enough. And the BBC happened to be doing an interview, and doggone if we didn't get it on tape. So I could put in the Pope's lap, your words are being quoted for death. And I said, you got to close that loophole, or your words are going to keep on being quoted for death. And he did. And he changed the catechism. That's the official teaching of the church, changed 1,700 years of teaching, which was the criterion the church had used, because it was always about defense of society. And in his encyclical in 95, The Gospel of Life, the Pope had said, we don't need the death penalty because we have a way to defend society without killing people. That was basically the argument. But then he said that thing of absolute necessity. And what they changed, the criteria that the church had used was for grievous or grave crimes, the state can execute. And they cut that out. It's 10 words they cut out, but it changed everything. Because stated in another way, it says, no matter how grave or grievous the crime, we have a way as a society to protect ourselves without killing. We do not kill. And now the Catholic bishops have gotten behind, and support among Catholics of the death penalty has dropped to 50%. There's education going on, folks, among the Catholics in the United States. 1 in every 4 people in the United States claim some kind of affiliation with, they'd say we lapsed or something, but they do identify themselves in some way as being Catholic. So we have a change here, and a change in the moral climate, and a way to augment and be catalyst in the moral discussion around the death penalty. So we have a stronger sense now among religious leadership than we had before. Ron was just telling me in the hearings you had in New York, religious leadership really in there in a way that when it was passed, there wasn't a peep from the religious folks. So the use of religion for the death penalty has been a huge thing, and I take that on, and Justice Scalia, folks. The second part of the book is called The Machinery of Death. Justice Scalia, you may find this hard to believe, goes duck hunting with my brother Louis in Louisiana. They go to Pecan Island. Louis fixes good gumbo and jambalaya and good stuff for Nino, his friend. When I hear that Louis, my beloved little brother, he's sweet, Louis is sweet and pious and good and prayerful, but he's like, politics just ain't his thing, all right? And so he doesn't follow the arguments too much. He said, Helen, guess who I'm going hunting with? I said, Louis, Scalia, you're going with Justice Scalia. I said, Louis, most of the people I've been with who've been killed and executed have been as a result of his vote. He said, sis, when we hunting, we don't talk about that court stuff, we just hunt. So I meet Justice Scalia in the airport in New Orleans as he's coming on a Sunday evening out of a duck hunt, and that opens up the machinery of death. Those words were used first by Harry Blackmun, the Nixon appointee, who after 20 years said, I will no longer tinker with the machinery of death. And here you have Justice Antonin Scalia saying, I know my fifth vote, when combined with 4 others, I know I'm part of the machinery of death. And he does not blink an eye. And it was at a conference he did in Chicago where I got the transcript where I really got his jurisprudence and his theology. And of course I take him on, and you will too. And we take on the Constitution here and the Bill of Rights here. How do we bring Americans into constitutional debate? How do we get people to understand what the provisions are in the Bill of Rights and protection for people? And we can't just say, well, the Supreme Court justices are the experts, and we abdicate thinking, debate, or understanding our own Constitution. We have to reclaim our Constitution. We got to take that Bill of Rights, paste it on our bathroom mirror, and start memorizing them. And death row inmates are the canaries in the coal mine. Because what happens to criminals and what happens to them, all you got to do is look around now in this war on terrorism. It's beginning to happen to all of us. And it is very serious. But how do you bring people through it in a way that they can understand the constitutional issues? Now, a gift of not being a lawyer is that I got to do it in a way I understand, so then they're going to understand it too. Just little capsules from Justice Scalia. Ron already gave one. His whole approach to, his fundamentalist approach to reading the Constitution is the same as somebody who reads the book of Genesis and says the world was created in 6 days. That's God's word. They said it. The literary, approach to it, fundamentalism. I just read the text, he says. I try to get in the mind of the framers, so whatever the framers intended, that's what we got to do. Everything else has to be done by the legislatures to change anything. So he could vote against Atkins and say the mentally retarded could be executed, because according to him, that's what the framers allowed. He even pulls out their definition of the time of an idiot. And it's somebody who doesn't know their mother and father and can't make change. That's his, but there's also a very moralistic judgmentalism in him, where he says, don't tell me they don't know right from wrong. Don't tell me they're poor or they use drugs or they're mentally retarded. They know right from wrong, and they have individual free will, and at any moment in life they have God's grace. So he can accept no mitigating circumstances. So you did the act, you pay for the crime. It's this atomistic, moving individual responsibility down to its finest cut, and not accepting. It doesn't allow for any compassion, because he doesn't understand that when you live in poverty and there are all the eddies in the river sucking you under, that you're much more inclined perhaps to break the law than when you're with a family where you never have to break the law because all the resources are there for you. He doesn't understand that, and the ideology becomes blinders, and you see it at work in his jurisprudence and in his theology, which is, as Ron pointed out. He even said, and he used the New Testament, he used an epistle from Romans 13. He said that divine authority has been given over to government to execute the wrath, God's wrath, We're agents of God. We're ministers of God's wrath, the government is. Individuals have to abide by what Jesus said about forgiving and so forth, but the government is God's minister for justice to execute the wrath of the sword on people who have committed murder. And he reads in that, he proof text, and he reads in that, clearly he says that upholds the death penalty. And that's when he said that snide little thing about Europe, that they follow Freud more than they follow Jesus. And thank goodness we're believers, and then we carry out God's will in the world. I mean, he's really scary, this theocracy stuff. You know the 10 Commandments thing that was going on in the courts, in the oral arguments? The guy presenting it, why you should keep the 10 Commandments, he was kind of downplaying it. It was religious, saying, you know, it's moral wisdom and found in other cultures. And Scalia cut him short, and he said, wait a minute, don't say that. Don't say that's not religious. This was his wording. The 10 Commandments hangs in the court as a symbol of the fact that God's divine authority has been given to us to carry out. Of the fact, as if people's faith has anything to do, the fact, a symbol of the fact. He calls it a fact. And we're in trouble. And the people have to understand it. It's very important that we help the people understand it. And in my experience, this is the hope. And Henry helped us a lot, just to use our minds to get the arguments. People are saying they didn't realize Henry wasn't a lawyer because he got the arguments. He looked at it. He delved into it. So we have to use our minds, and we got to use our hearts, because hearts are about courage. Hearts about Martin Luther King kind of stuff. Hearts are about eyes on the prize. Hearts are about standing up for stuff because it's right. Hearts are about knowing that we have to unite in community with others, and that lone rangers are never going to win run the long race. We can only make it by joining with others to do it together. And hearts are about hope. And we have to believe, and my experience has helped me to believe with the American people, that people are good, that when people are awakened to these issues, they respond. And it's our task, once we are awake, to be the people, to help others, to respond. Knowledge has an ethics. Knowledge is not neutral. When we know something and are aware of something and are convinced in our hearts that this is wrong and against our deepest principles, we have a summons then, an ethical summons to act in some way. And not to act then is for us to fail what we have learned. And so we can't be neutral about it. I just want to say in ending, we'll have the books, both Dead Man Walking and The Death of Innocence. You can get the combo of both of the paperbacks for $25. It helps the moratorium campaign. We have some books that Tim Robbins, Susan Sarandon, and I signed that are $100, and that helps our campaign. I don't care even if you have signed things in New York. The reason we want to encourage you to sign the moratorium petition is it's worldwide. And if you haven't signed our national moratorium one yet, I want to ask you please to do that. Your signature is very precious. It represents you and your uniqueness that only you can give. And I want to ask you to put your names on those petitions. And then these are postcards to send to your New York Assembly people, because they're going to be the ones, folks, finally, where this issue is going to get joined. God knows what that court is going to do. But in the Assembly, you have those hearings behind you where 9 out of 10 people spoke against the death penalty. But you got to get to the Assembly people. And so please take these postcards from the New Yorkers Against the Death Penalty. Laura is here. and she'll be there with them at the tables, and I'll sign books for you tonight as long as you want to stay. Okay, let's stop here, and we can have
questions
and discussion.
right. But